welcome to the Target UPSC Prelims 2024 series. And in this, the subject which we will be covering today is economy, and this will be the 6th episode of economy. So let's begin. First, we will be talking about the topic of cotton. So why is it in news? So the Ministry of Textiles has hosted a conference for World Cotton Day, and World Cotton Day is celebrated on 7th of October 2023. And the conference was held in collaboration with Cotton Corporation of India, that is CCI, and EU Resource Efficiency Initiative. So this was held in collaboration with CCI and EU Resource Efficiency Initiative, and the key outcomes include introduction of bale identification and traceability system. So that is referred to as BITS. So remember the acronym, that is BITS, using blockchain technology. So the blockchain technology is also used here, and blockchain technology basically remains in news because of the cryptocurrencies and the launch of the Kasturi Cotton program. Now this is important. The Kasturi Cotton program becomes important for quality cotton with traceability. So to increase the quality of the cotton and also with regard to its traceability, the Kasturi Cotton program has been launched. Now what is bale identification and traceability system, also referred to as BITS? So it utilizes the blockchain technology to assign unique QR codes to cotton bales. So every cotton bale will have a unique QR code, and while scanning the QR code or while looking at the QR code will give information with regard to the unique nature or with regard to the information about the cotton bales. Then it provides transparency regarding cotton bales, quality, variety, origin and processing details for domestic and international buyers. So domestic and international buyers both will be able to trace the quality, variety, origin and processing details for domestic and international buyers. Then traceability is enabled by scanning the QR codes to track cotton bales from origin to the final products. So traceability means that every person or every producer will be able to trace his or her own cotton bales, so that from the point of its origin to the point it is going somewhere, so they will be able to trace it. And it is implemented by CCI in collaboration with state governments. So there is the involvement of state government also. Then what is Kasturi Cotton program? Now this is important. So Kasturi Cotton program, it promotes production and availability of premium quality cotton with traceability. So the quality of cotton will also be good and traceability factor will also be there. It means that the cotton bales will be traced. Then overseen by TEXPROCIL. So it is overseen by Texprocil in collaboration with CCI for the Ministry of Textiles. So the ministry involved here is the Ministry of Textiles, and it is certified to meet quality standards such as fiber length, strength and color. So that the color of cotton needs to be of perfect, then the strength, then fiber length. So basically the Kasturi Cotton program is with regard to the premium quality of cotton with traceability. So you can say it is quality plus traceability is equals to Kasturi Cotton program. Then next, key facts about cotton. So cotton is a kharif crop and it takes 6 to 8 months to mature, and it is drought resistant because basically the area where the production of cotton takes place is an arid climate. So it takes place at a climate where there is very less air, and it is a drought resistant crop also, and it is ideal for arid climates. Kharif crop, and it occupies 2.1% of the world's arable land. So world's arable land, 2.1% is occupied by cotton and meets 27% of the world's textiles needs. So world's textiles need, all over the world textile need, 20% is met by cotton. With regard to the cultivation requirements, so the temperature it requires is between 21 to 30 degrees Celsius. Then rainfall 50 to 100 centimeter. Soil type is well drained black cotton soil, that is Regur soil. So remembering the soil becomes easy for you as the black cotton soil, as the name will tell you that it is related to cotton, or you can remember the name Regur soil, R-E-G-U-R. Now top cotton producing countries, that is India, China and the US. So these are the top cotton producing countries, that is India, China and the US. And the top cotton producing states in India, so that is Gujarat, Maharashtra, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan. So you can say basically South India is also involved, West India is also involved. So next is, so this was about the cotton. Next topic is 2023 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. So in the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences is not the original Nobel Prizes which was given, like for example the Nobel Peace Prize, Physics, Chemistry and all these types of Nobel Prizes. So the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences was later on added. Then why this was in news? Because Claudia Goldin, who is a Harvard University professor, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics for the year 2023, and she was recognized for research advancing understanding of the gender gap in the labor market. So she basically talks about the gender gap, that is between male and female in the labor market, that is the female participation in the labor force. Then she is the third woman to win the prize, so that in itself is a very big achievement. And the previous female winners were Elinor Ostrom in 2009 and Esther Duflo in 2019. So Claudia Goldin being the third one. Now what is the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences? So the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences was established in the year 1968 by Severiges Riksbank in memory of the Alfred Nobel. So Alfred Nobel was the man in whose memory the Nobel Prize is given for doing something for the betterment of the society or doing something for the betterment of the humankind. Like for example, Nobel Prize in Physics, Chemistry, Literature, Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, etc. Then it is officially called the Severiges Riksbank Prize in Economic Sciences in the memory of Alfred Nobel, and it is not one of the original Nobel Prizes which was established by the Nobel's bill, because it was later on added, and it honors outstanding contributions to economics and its application to real world problems. And we all know that even economic Nobel has a very good relation with Indians also, as Abhijit Banerjee or Amritya Sen, these people have also won the Nobel Prize. Then why has Claudia Goldin been chosen for the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences? Now about Claudia Goldin. So she is a pioneer in studying women's role in the economy. So the basic theme on which she writes is women's role in economy, women's role in labor market, gender gap, gender pay gap. So this is the basic theme on which she writes. And she has authored books on the topics such as Understanding the Gender Gap and Career and Family. Now about her work, she has provided a comprehensive account of women's earnings and labor market participation over time, and she has stalked it with regard to from the times of Industrial Revolution to now, that how the women's participation in the labor force has, even though the literacy level has increased, but still the labor force participation is not increasing. And then the gender pay gap. Research reveals causes of change and sources of the remaining gender gap. So causes of change and sources of the remaining gender gap. Work sheds light on women's participation in the labor market over the past 200 years and even more than that. Findings are applicable to many countries, not just the United States of America, because if one person will talk about specifically one country, then it will create problem, because that will not talk about the global scenario. Even though US being the oldest democracy and then being the most powerful economy, being the biggest economy, then if a person will talk only with regard to the United States of America, that will not lead to, or that will not represent other countries of European continent or Asian continent or African continent, because Asian and African continent are the continent where majority of the population is residing as of now. Then findings of Claudia's research related to women's participation in workforce. Now let's talk about from historical perspective. So that is with regard to pre-industrialization times. So women involved in agriculture and cottage industry, because pre-industrialization, it was the agriculture in which the majority of the women, and the cottage industry where majority of the women were involved. And if we talk with regard to India, then as of now also in majority of the women who are participating in the labor force are involved in agriculture, and there is a term which we also use, that is the feminization of agriculture, because more number of females are being involved in agriculture, and many a time that also creates a problem of disguised unemployment. Then industrialization and factory work posed challenges for women leaving their homes, as these were difficult places to work. Industrialization, the industries are not easy places to work, because there a person gets to see many different perspective or many different forms of work. So when a person or a female who's not used to that environment, who's not used to that work, and who has always remained at home and has taken care of the home, so she finds it very difficult to adjust to the new environment. Then role of the services sector. Growth of the services sector in the early 20th century provided women with education and employment opportunities. So services sector has been a revolution in this regard, because services sector is something where you will find good job, you will find salaried job, and a person or a female can also find flexible jobs which will be very helpful for them, that they can on one hand take care of their home, they can take care of fulfilling the role of being a mother, and then they can work also. So services sector has been very good in the sense that it has motivated and it has encouraged more number of females to enter the labor force. Then marriage barriers. By the 20th century, 20% of women were employed, but only 5% of married women worked. Now this is where the majority of the problem as of now also lies. If we talk about the women's participation in labor force, so these are basically is overpowered by the females who are not married. And females after marriage, it has been a trend, and it has been seen that more number of females after getting married, they tend to leave their jobs to handle the family responsibility, and specifically if we talk about then after giving birth to the child, the first child, we see that the number of females returning back to their professional life or returning back to their workplace is very low. So that is where the problem lies, that unmarried women, they are working, but the percentage of married women and the percentage of mothers in the workforce is very low. Then legislation like marriage bars prevented married women from continuing employment in teaching or office works. Then role of expectations and career choices. So women's career decisions influenced by their mother's experiences affecting career longevity and continuity. Now this is also a problem. if you will see that what are the sectors where majority of the females are employed. So you can say, first of all, more number of females you will find in contractual work or work from home or gig economy you will also find, but salaried women's and formal employed women's are very less in number. And that too, specifically if we talk about the sectors, then majority of the women will work in sectors like HR department, that is the human resource department. So these are the sectors where the women work. While if we will see that the top management, the women, you will find very less number of women. Then you will find very less number of women in many respects like Navy, like Army, like Air Force, or you can say the field jobs, women are very less. Traffic police, the women are less in number. So etc. These are few of the things where the proportion of male overpowers the female. While on the other hand, you will find the nursing jobs, you will find a lot of females. Teaching, you will find a lot of females. HR department, you will find a lot of females. Then role of contraceptive pills. So contraceptive pills allowed women to control childbirth and plan their careers, and more women studied fields like law, economics and medicine. So contraceptive pills and its awareness has also played a huge role in women's life, as the women became aware that the birth of unwanted child, or if they do not want to give birth to a child at a particular time, then that can be prevented. Role of parenthood in pay gap. Despite improvements in education and employment, the pay gap persists. Gender pay gap means, like for example, if there is a male and there is a female and they both are at the position of manager, while it has been seen that there is a pay gap, that women or females are paid lesser as compared to the males. So imagine if the male is earning a package of 15 lakh per annum, on the other hand female would be earning a package of 10 to 12 lakh per annum, so they are paid less as compared to male. So that is basically the gender pay gap. Initial earning differs are small, but women earnings fall after the first child. And this has also been seen that when women enter the motherhood stage, that is where their career becomes stagnant. And that is also the time where the earning of a female dips down. Then parenthood contributes to the widening pay gap. Then next topic is India's aviation industry. So India's aviation industry, why is it in news? So India's aviation industry has seen remarkable growth in recent years, and the demand for the better aviation standards and better requirements will be rising in the future. Then challenges include a severe shortage of experienced pilots. So shortage of pilots is also causing a problem, and recently we are seeing a lot of news which came that the flights were getting very delayed because of the shortage of staff and the pilots and the staff being overworked. What is the status of the aviation industry in India? So India's aviation industry covers all aspects of civil aviation. For example, it includes airlines, airports, aircraft, manufacturing and regulatory authorities. So all these things comes under the aviation industry in India. Now let's talk about the status of aviation industry in India. So India is the world's third largest domestic aviation market. So the countries which will be ahead of India would be US, China. Then expected airport capacity to handle 1 billion trips annually by the year 2023, and the demand for the aviation sector in India is increasing. The demand is on a high, and that is why it is creating problems specifically with regard to the bigger airports like the Mumbai airport, Delhi airport, Chennai airport, that they need to see and they need to find ways to control the crowd or the rising demand. The FDI, which is the foreign direct investment in the air transport sector, reached USD 3.73 billion between April 2002 December 2022. So the FDI is also increasing in the aviation sector. And if we talk about the aviation industry, then there is 100% FDI, but there are regulations in certain aspects of it. Then what are the associated challenges with regard to the aviation industry in India? So first is the infrastructure constraints. So airport congestion in major cities like Mumbai and Delhi, because they are handling a lot of capacity and many a times the congestion takes place. Then limited regional connectivity in smaller towns and regions. So this is a problem, that even though the airports are there are greenfield and brownfield airports which are being developed in smaller regions also. But what happens is, because of the cost of the airlines or the flight, many a times, or the aviation sector, people do not in one go switch towards the air mode. Then high operating cost, high taxes on aviation turbine fuel, that is ATF, and airport charges, and states charge up to 30% taxes on the jet fuel, and this also makes the flight cost of flight very expensive. Pilot shortages, difficulty in recruiting and retaining experienced pilots, as there is shortage of pilot, but the problem being that there is very high cost of pilot training, and that is nearly 1 crore. And then because of the shortage of pilots, the pilots which are already in the service, they tend to overwork, and that is what many a times causes tiredness in the staff, and this also increases the chance of mishappening. Then security threats, cyber threats to aviation infrastructure and passenger data risk, because there is huge data involved, as there are so many people traveling from one place to another place. So cyber security becomes very important. Related government initiatives. So the GST rate reduced to 5% from 18% for domestic maintenance, repair and overhaul services. So the GST rate has been reduced. Earlier it was 18%, but now it has been reduced to 5% to lower down the cost. Then RCS Udan to promote the air connectivity to unserved and the underserved airports. So under the regional connectivity scheme and the Udan scheme, even the smaller cities or the tier 2, tier 3 cities will be connected through the air, and this is happening under the Udan scheme. National Civil Aviation Policy 2016. So this also looks into the increasing the or setting the aviation standards in India. Then next is the prompt NPA labeling for willful defaulters. NPA is the non-performing asset, and willful defaulters are people who are not able to pay back the loan which they have taken. So why is it in news? So the Reserve Bank of India, which is the Central Bank of India, it has proposed lenders classify borrowers as willful defaulters within 6 months of their account being declared a non-performing asset. So within 6 months of their account being declared a NPA, it needs to be done. Now what are the key highlights of the RBI draft? It talks about that lenders must identify willful defaulter borrowers within 6 months of their accounts becoming NPAs. So the bank or any financial entity which is giving the loan, it needs to identify the willful defaulter, and the lenders assess willful default for accounts over rupees 25 lakh. So an amount of above 25 lakh will be taken into consideration. Identification committee reviews evidence of willful default. So evidence needs to be there. Then non-discriminatory photo publishing required for willful defaulters, and no credit for up to 1 year. No credit for up to 1 year post removal from the list of willful defaulters. So if a person gets removed from the list of willful defaulters, for 1 year he or she will not get any credit. and no credit for new ventures for 5 years after LWD removal. So if any MSME or any kind of venture, if it comes out of the LWD, then for 5 years they will not be getting any credit. Then the guarantors can be pursued without exhausting remedies against principal debtors. So these are the few of the highlights. Now, who is a willful defaulter? So who is considered a willful defaulter? So a willful defaulter is a borrower or guarantor. Borrower or guarantor. It is not that the guarantor is not under it. Who has committed willful default? Willful default means that the person is not paying back the money and has an outstanding amount of rupees 25 lakh or more. Remember words rupees 25 lakh or more, borrower or guarantor, willful defaulter. Event constituting willful default. So those are default in meeting payment, repayment obligation when able to. So when the person is able to repay but the person does not repay. Use of funds for purposes other than those specified for the loan. So when the person takes any kind of loan from the banks, the person has to write that for what purpose the person is taking loan, and the person does not use the money for the required purpose and use it in some other way. Siphoning off of funds, leaving them unavailable for the loan purpose, or disposal or removal of assets, securing a term loan without the lender's knowledge. So when the person, in the end, what the simple crux is that in the end, the borrower who has taken the money is not able to pay back the money to the lender. Then what is a non-performing asset? That is NPA. So NPA classification for loans or advances that are in default or arrears for scheduled payments of principal or interest, and the debt classified as non-performing if payment not made for at least 90 days. It means that the person who has to pay back the money does not pay back the money for continuously 90 days, then it starts to come under NPA. For agriculture, if principal and interest not paid for 2 cropping seasons, the loan is classified as NPA. So if we talk about from the perspective of agriculture, then specifically it is with regard to 2 cropping seasons. So for 2 cropping seasons, if the principal amount is not paid, then it is considered as NPA. Now what are the types? That is, first is gross NPA, that is total sum of defaulted loans. Then second is net NPA, amount realized after provision amount deducted from gross NPA. So there is gross and there is net. Then laws and provisions related to the non-performing assets. So what are the laws and provisions related to it? First is the bad bank. First it is about the bad bank. So the National Asset Reconstruction Limited works as an asset reconstruction company, and what NARC does, that NARC buys the bad loans. NARC buys bad loans from banks and attempts to sell stressed loans. So there is this bank and then there is NARC. So whatever are the bad loans which are not coming back, the NARC buys it and then it tries to sell the stressed asset out of it. And then the India Debt Resolution Company Limited sells these stressed assets in the market, and then these stressed assets are sold in the market. Then comes the SARFAESI Act of 2002, and the SARFAESI Act of 2002 allows banks and financial institutions to take possession of collateral assets and sell them to recover dues without court intervention. So when, imagine this is bank and this is borrower. So when the borrower goes to the bank to take a loan, the borrower keeps a collateral. So if the borrower is not able to pay back the loan to the bank, then it can use the collateral without the court intervention. Then it provides provisions for the enforcement of security interest. So this is basically to reduce the burden of the banks. Then Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code of 2016. Then this is a comprehensive framework for insolvency and bankruptcy resolution process in India. And this aims for time-bound resolution of stressed assets. So the time-bound resolution, so that things happen within a stipulated time period. And it establishes National Company Law Tribunal, that is NCLT, and Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India, that is IBBI. So this helps in, if the person can say that he or she has become insolvent and now is bankrupt and does not have the enough money to pay back the loan. Then next is the illicit trade in India. So a report by FICCI Cascade titled Hidden Streams, Linkages Between Illicit Markets, Financial Flows, Organized Crime and Terrorism. It talks about the illegal economy in India with an overall score of 6.3 on a scale of 1 to 0. So illegal economy in India it talks about. Then FICCI Cascade is an initiative by the FICCI, that is Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry, which was established in the year 2011. And the committee addresses the issue of illicit trade in counterfeits, pass-offs and smuggled goods in India and globally. So it basically talks about, you can say, the black money or the trade which is not legal and enters into the market through illegal measures. Now about illicit trade, the definition is that the illicit trade involves the illegal exchange. So something which is not legal, something which do not have any kind of legal backing. Involves the illegal exchange of goods, services or commodities, circumventing established laws and regulations. Few of the key highlights of the report. So overview of illicit trade in India. So in 2022-23, seizure includes 3.5 tons of gold, 18 CR cigarette sticks, 140 metric tons of rad senders and 90 tons of heroin. So these are few of the examples of illicit trade in India. And India has a score of 4.3 out of 10 for organized crime, lower than the global average, indicating lesser involvement of organized crime actors. Now this is a good thing that India has a low score. Illicit financial flows in India. From 2009 to 2018, India faced a potential revenue loss of 13 billion due to misvoiced imports and exports. So a loss of 13 billion. Now this becomes a huge amount. Then terror and crime in India. So dealing with terrorism and crime cost India approximately 1170 billion. That is around 6% of the GDP. Huge numbers. Then drug economy in India. So India is located near major drug producing regions like, for example, the Golden Triangle and the Golden Crescent. So that these are the opium regions. Golden Crescent is Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then comes Golden Triangle, that is Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, resulting in increased drug trade. As these are the neighboring countries of India, the countries which lie very close to India and in proximity to India. So this is with regard to the drug trade and increasing drug trade in India. Then organized crime and illegal economy in India. So aggregate score of organized crime actors in India is low at 4.3. So this is a good point for India. However, criminal networks have a significant influence in India with a score of 6. So criminal network has a high score. Organized crime has a low score, but criminal network has a high score. Next comes the Rashtriya Gokul Mission. So the next topic is of Rashtriya Gokul Mission. Why is it in news? So the Rashtriya Gokul Mission, which was established in 2014, was initially designed to improve the quality of indigenous breeds. So it is about the improvement of quality, but it has mainly promoted the Gir cow across the country. Now what is the issue with Rashtriya Gokul Mission? Prominence of Gir cow, that it basically promoted the Gir cow. So the focus has shifted to Gir cows due to their milk production and adaptability. The production of milk is high and they adapt to the situation fast. As a result, other indigenous breeds like Sahiwal and Haryana have not experienced similar growth, and some have even seen declines. So because of the more focus on Gir cow, other indigenous species are facing problems. Issues with the indigenous Gir cow breed: inconsistent performance of graded Gir cow. So the performance is not consistent, it is inconsistent. So the graded Gir cow do not consistently outperform indigenous breeds in many states. So it is not that it has a continuous performance and it is outperforming the indigenous breeds in every state. That many a times it has been seen that the other indigenous cows or the other indigenous varieties are performing better than the Gir cow. In regions such as East Rajasthan, graded Gir cow have lower milk production compared to indigenous varieties. So at many places the Gir cow has lower milk production. Now factors beyond adaptation. Performance can be influenced by factors beyond microclimates. For example, Gir cows prefer herds and may struggle in isolation. So they do not work well in isolation. About Rashtriya Gokul Mission, what is it all about? So implemented in 2014 for the development and conservation of indigenous bovine breeds. For the conservation of the indigenous breeds. Continued under Rashtriya Pashudhan Vikas Yojana with a budget of around 2,400 crores. So it has worked for the development of the indigenous breeds. Nodal ministries: Ministry of Fishing, Fisheries, Animal Husbandry and Dairying. Important point to remember. Objectives is to enhance productivity of bovines and milk production sustainably. So if the milk production will increase, so the cow or the bovine sector will also increase. Use high genetic merit bulls for breeding. High genetic merit bulls for breeding. Expand artificial insemination services. So the artificial insemination services will also expand. Promote indigenous cattle and buffalo rearing scientifically. Indigenous cattle and buffalo rearing will be promoted. Then next, that is India-Japan chip supply chain partnership. So why is it in news? So the Union Cabinet have approved a MOC, that is the Memorandum of Cooperation between India and Japan on developing a semiconductor supply chain partnership. And semiconductor is the point where we actually import the semiconductors, and the indigenous manufacturing is very low, and we basically import the semiconductors from China, as China is considered to be the major manufacturing hub of semiconductors. Significance of MOC: it recognizes the importance of semiconductors for industry and digital advancements, specifically with regard to the electrical industry. The MOC was signed in July between India and Japan. India's semiconductor ambitions. So India is working to establish a reliable presence in the global semiconductor supply chain. That India also has a role, because the role of semiconductors in the global market is increasing. A $10 billion plan has been initiated to boost local chip production. It means manufacturing will increase, with companies like Micron Technology setting up facilities in Gujarat. So this will be a positive for India. Then India-US collaboration. So India and the US are collaborating to strengthen chip supply chains for building resilient global semiconductor supply chains. As of now, the leading exporter is China. So India will also hold a positive position as compared to China. US chip companies like Micron Chip Technologies and AMD are investing in India to expand its operations. Then what are semiconductors? So semiconductors are basically a class of crystalline solids intermediate in electrical conductivity between a conductor and an insulator. So it is used basically between a conductor and an insulator, and they intermediate. So it intermediate the electrical conductivity between these two. Now India Semiconductor Mission, ISM, it is a very high profile mission. It was launched in the year 2021, financial outlay of 76,000 crore. and the ministry involved is the Ministry of Electronics and IT, that is MEITY. Aim is to provide the financial support to companies investing in semiconductors, display, manufacturing and design ecosystem. See, semiconductors production is difficult because it requires a huge capital. First, it requires skilled workforce. Second, then it requires a huge infrastructure. Third, and then the supply chain has to be very good. Fourth, and these are few of the problems that we have, and skilled workforce is also a problem. The ecosystem has to be very good with regard to the semiconductors. Then what are the components of it? That is a scheme for setting up semiconductor fabs in India to support the production of semiconductors, as it needs a proper space and the fabrication unit where everything with regard to the semiconductors and its production can be done. Then a scheme for setting up display fabs in India, and also to provide fiscal support to it because it is a very capital intensive industry. Then a scheme for setting up compound semiconductors facilities in India. Then design linked incentive scheme, and it will also offer financial incentives, design infrastructure support for development and deployment of semiconductor designs, as it is the design which will be a very basic part in it, that is the starting point to the developed semiconductor industry or for the manufacture of semiconductor. So design will be at the most basic level that needs to be done, because after that only other processes will start. So these are few of the components for the setting up of the semiconductor industry in India. So this was the last topic of today. So these are the topics that we discussed. Let's rewind it. India-Japan chip supply chain partnership, Rashtriya Gokul mission, illicit trade in India, prompt NPA labeling for willful defaulters, India's aviation industry, 2023 Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences, and then it was about cotton. So these are the topics which we discussed in today's episode, and that's all. And in the next episode, we will be discussing more topics with regard to economy. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Till we meet next time. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep subscribing to the channel. Thank you.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe. And do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.